Well, welcome, man. First of all, how has this whole process been for you? It's been 30 years of getting to live in the character as far as the public goes. You know, you've done almost no press, but I mean, beyond that, not even doing stuff out of character. Nobody's gotten to know you at all as far as the wrestling community goes, you know, outside of the inner circle. For people to kind of see you as Mark Calloway, is that a weird thing?
It's been very weird, and I've actually it's been a process because a lot of times, especially early on in this deal, uh, I still found myself being guarded. Like, I can't, like, I'd want to start to talk, and then I like, wait a minute, I don't know if I should say that, and then then I'd have to process it all in my head, and I'm like, no, this is your idea. You wanted to do this, so let it go. And then, because I've always been that guy, it's like I'm the last of the kayfabe guys, right? Like I'm just,
Yeah.
protect everything at all cost. And I'd be the one when I'd hear somebody else talking about the inner workings of the business or anything like that, I'm the guy in the back going, oh, just pulling my hair out. And now I'm that guy. So it's taken a little bit of time to kind of get used to that. And, but I'm, it's obviously now it's starting to get a little easier, and we're kind of starting to scratch the different layers of who the Undertaker and Mark Calloway and how they fit together. And
Yeah.
Do the fans like it, or do they get like? Is it hard for them to see you out of character, or are they comfortable with it?
It's funny. Most everything has been very positive, and like, people are just, because they've been dying for years to kind of, for me to lift the veil up and see what's going on. And but then there's always the one or two people that are like, my childhood is dead.
Yeah.
Because I finally, or if I did something on social media or whatever, it's like, the Undertaker's on social media. My childhood is a waste. I mean, like come on, man. You cut me some slack, will you? But
yeah, that is a lot of responsibility for you to live up to.
What's that?
That's a lot of responsibility for you to live up to, that you're not just doing this for you anymore. Like, you are responsible for the childhoods of tens and hundreds of thousands of now 30-year-old men that are looking at you.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
So the first live show that I ever went to was at Wembley Stadium. It was 1992. It was SummerSlam. And that was the show that you came to the ring in a hearse.
Right.
In front of 90,000 people. A couple of things, like, now that I think about that, there are a couple of things about that are mind-boggling to me. Number one, that you were in your 20s when you were doing that. So you're a kid going through all that.
Ago, yeah.
And number two, that you'd really only been in WWE less than 2 years at that point, and already felt like, oh, well, that's the Undertaker. He's a staple of this whole thing. What was that like for you at that time to go through?
It was just it was utterly amazing to see that many people. And then coupled with the fact that it was in the UK too, I was still like in that whole world of so many things were being exposed to me, and things were on such a bigger stage, a big grander stage. But just, I remember riding on that hearse on the way to the ring, it's just like all you could see were people. And obviously at that point in my career, that was what, 30,000-40,000 more people than I'd ever worked in front of at that point. And it was it was like, wow, this is pretty damn cool, man. And then trying to obviously stay in character and not be not trying to show any emotion or any, how excited I was.
Yeah, that's the part that I've always wondered. What's the worry? Is it that you're gonna, on your face, crack a smile or like look up and not be the Undertaker for a second? Or is it that, oh my God, I hope I don't stumble walking out of this hearse because it ruins the whole thing?
I think probably the stumbles were always more of a, because that character is so calculated and so stoic. It's just like, and because everybody is just like they're mesmerized and what, because I move so slow, and it's just like, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do? And yeah, if I stump my toe and do the trip run kind of thing, it's over. It's like, oh man, he's just like us. But fortunately, I didn't have too many of those through the years. But that was always one of the things that I was thinking about. When I locked in, especially early on, when I really felt like I had a grasp of the character, I don't think anybody could make me smile or break character. But yeah, every once in a while, something might jump up and trip you.
What's it like the first time you walk out as a character? Is there a fear the very first time you walk out in any character that people won't like it or they won't respond to it? What is that like?
Yeah, it was pretty nerve wracking because I had spent 8, almost 9 months in WCW. So people had, they'd seen me, and then I had a fairly good break before I started with WWE. But you're always kind of like, you got this really strong character, and it's new, and it's on WWF at the time, so obviously you're nervous because it's your debut being with a new company, and you've got all this behind you, and you don't want to be sitting there listening to, hey, that's Mean Mark, it's just like, come on. But it was nerve wracking for sure.
When did you realize that the position that you were in that company, or when did you really get into that position, right? Because, I mean, clearly Vince McMahon had a fondness for that character from the very beginning. I mean, from the huge debut to the fact that you had a victory over Hogan within a year of you being there. But, there are all these stories of Vince liking something and then, kind of getting tired of it, or it not panning out like you thought he would, or whatever, and he loses interest. And that's it. It's goodbye. When did you realize, no, I'm a staple here. This is my position. I'm one of the top people forever.
Yeah, it was. I still didn't have that feeling when I beat Hogan. I knew I was coming up, but I wasn't there yet. I was still kind of like, all right, I'm just doing what I'm told, and hopefully this thing keeps developing. It was probably about the time I did the angle I did with Jake. That was probably when I felt like, okay, we have something here. And there was a large movement to turn that character babyface.
Right.
That was done. The audience, our fans did that. They didn't have any. I don't think anybody, when they originally thought of that character, ever thought of it turning babyface. I mean, it was just too dark and too macabre, especially for the time that we were doing it. And then, next thing you know, I'm getting cheered, and it was just like, hey, this is a sick world out here.
Do you worry at all before you turn babyface in that first year? When, you're skyrocketed. Like, the first big angle you have is with Warrior, and then you have the angle with Hogan, and it's like you're working with the top people from the very beginning. Does it ever occur to you, if I don't become a good guy, I'm running out of top good guys to work with. If I don't become a good guy, where does this character go? After Hogan's done and Warrior's done, the only place to go is down, right?
Yeah, you have to think like that. But at the time, I wish, I didn't dwell on it too much. But we had there was still a pretty good influx of talent coming in and going out. Obviously, Hogan and Warrior were 1 and 2 on the totem pole. But I knew that I knew there were legs there, but I didn't get too overly concerned. Now, probably if I knew what I knew now, then I would have probably been a little bit like, okay, that's the top 2 guys. Where we heading?
Right.
But obviously, there were guys like Jake, and that was a perfect, darkness. Jake was a dark character, and so sometimes ignorance is bliss, because you can't you can't worry about too much. But it is what it is, and it worked out all right, I guess.
Early on, did you ever worry about getting caught doing Undertaker things, like the fans, like you're crying at a Julia Roberts movie or whatever it is that you're doing that doesn't fit, and you have to worry about them seeing you doing that?
Absolutely, man. I don't think anybody ever caught me crying at the Julia Roberts movie, but
That's just my own example.
I think I kept my sunglasses on for that. No, but like I said, I lived this character. I was Undertaker 24/7. So I was always cognizant of, what are you doing? How are you moving? And it's just like, it's like, oh man, I don't want somebody, seeing me going and ordering a smoothie, or, it's like,
Yeah.
it was a lot easier back then, obviously, because there was no, there wasn't cell phones, and everything you did wasn't being recorded. Nowadays there's just, there's just no way you can do it anymore. But back then it was a little easier, and my focus, I knew what I wanted to do. I had this mindset of, this is what people are going to see. So, I actually thought, like, I would be in my hotel room thinking about, okay, this is how you need to be when you're going through the airport. This is what you need to be at the rent-a-car place. And, if we did any outside media, like, okay, I got to let Paul Bearer, he's got to do the gist of the talking, and I'm just there to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's really it's really interesting because, like, even when you look back at photos that have now come out, because everything's on the internet now, and you look at photos of like you hanging out with the boys in that era, and you're
Right.
backstage and you're on a bus or whatever. It's a photo from somebody's private photo album, but you still, even in that photo that no fan would ever see, you have this element of the character. You're in all black, you got the hair down, you got the shades on, like it still looks like you're the Undertaker. How long would a person have to be around before they kind of got to know you backstage?
Well, I made a point early on, like our crew and our roadies, everybody. I always made a point to, go up and say hello to them.
Mm-hmm.
But before they got to the back of the bus and the European tours, which I think is one of the pictures you're referencing, it took a long time before I felt comfortable letting anybody back there. It was just because that is a little point, even though I still look like that's kind of where you let your guard down, and you kind of let that, you take that deep breath and exhale, and you have a moment with your friends and your peers. But I really had to, I had to trust people. And most of those guys understood what I was trying to do. And, and they all, I can't say that there's really anybody that was like, well, I'm going to try and expose him for this or that. They understood, and they understood the importance of the character. And most, everybody obviously wanted to, they wanted to do angles anyway. So it was,
right.
But I was pretty guarded most of the time. But I wasn't like, I didn't, I wasn't like, if, some rigger came by, I wasn't like, hello, I was like, hey, how are you? You doing okay? But I always felt like it's important to treat people, treat people the way you want to be treated. But
that is the difference,
it just
right?
became understood that, okay, this is how he is. And,
Isn't this easier, less pressure? Isn't this easier at this point?
It's much easier. And, even Michelle now will tell me, he's like, I kind of liked it more when you didn't talk so much. It was like, it's like, I got 30 years built up inside of me. I got to get it out.
Yeah. You went through this period of time, it's pretty long. It was most of your career, I think, where I think you were viewed as so dependable in WWE and a person that would not only always be there, but would always deliver on a certain level, that you started getting every opponent thrown at you that, whether they could wrestle or not, if they looked like a monster, it would be like a guy would come in and be an Undertaker opponent. We were talking about this before you came on, about how, you ended up having to drag 8-foot guys through WrestleMania matches and having you had your orbital socket broken by a 600-pound man dropping his leg on your face. Did you get to a place where you were like, look, Vince, I appreciate that you think I'm dependable, but please let me work with some of these guys that know what they're doing.
Oh yeah, man. I begged him all the time. I was just like, and it was funny because I knew, like, when somebody would come in, it'd be like, oh. even before I got the call into his office, I knew, like, yeah, he's headed my way. Yeah, I remember you mentioning 8 foot, which was obviously Giant Gonzalez.
Yes.
I tried to tell this story really quickly. I remember he came in about the same time that Yokozuna came in.
Mm-hmm.
And I had known Yoko from Japan and seen him work over there as Kokina, Maximus, and I was always just enthralled and amazed by how good a worker he was and how well he moved for the size he was. And anyway, he was doing a dark match. He had signed, but he was doing a dark match. I think we were in Baltimore. And so there's a stage there in Baltimore that you can go out and you can kind of peek through the curtain and watch, and no one sees you. And so I see Vince standing there, and he's watching Yoko work, and I come stand next to Vince, and we're both watching him and just, watching some of the stuff that he's doing, these kicks that he's throwing, and how agile he moved at 400 pounds. And I remember just stopping and turning my head and looking at Vince, and I was like, please, let me work with him first. And, Vince, and as Vince laughed, oh, you'll work with him in time, but I got somebody else in mind for you. And I kid you not, coming down the hall from the other direction, here comes Giant Gonzalez, right? He goes, that's your guy. And I was just like, oh, no. Because I got a little bit of taste of Giant Gonzalez when we were in WCW together, right?
Right.
And I think that might have been another reason why I left, because they were trying to get me in a program down there. And
yeah, but you didn't realize all that Giant Gonzalez needed was a full bodysuit with fur in all the right places,
patches.
right?
Yeah. Oh my, that was the worst. That was so hideous, man. It was so bad on so many levels.
So
but
when
I got him first, so
you got him first, and you get through your match at WrestleMania 9, and you're like, okay, I did it. We got through it. It was a WrestleMania match, and we did it, and it was big, and it's over, and we are good. When you find out we're doing it again at SummerSlam, do you go, what do I have to do?
Man, I tell you what, that whole thing took years off my career. I mean, I would be in much better shape now if I could have skipped that one program. Yeah, it was as physically demanding as it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was twice the mental strain, because you got guys out, you got Brett's there, and now Yoko's there. All these guys are going out and having these great matches, and obviously you want to be mentioned in the same breath with those guys, and it was just not possible. It was survival every night, trying to figure out what he could do, and it took me I had to, because at that time I didn't sell a lot and bump around, but man, I was flopping and just trying to, I was trying to make chicken salad out of chicken crap. And it was it did help me, and it prepared me later on for being able to work with people, obviously,
with literally anyone.
Whew,
yeah,
I still
at that point
wake up with cold sweats.
Yeah, that's got to be number one. You feel like you can literally work with anyone. And number two, when you finally do start having these matches that people are like, that's the greatest wrestling match of all time. You're going, well, yeah, I earned the right to have that match. Okay. Do you know what I had to go through to get here?
No doubt, man. It was, after a while, like, because you work that gimmick, and then you really, it was always about the gimmick, really. And so it really didn't matter who he plugged in against it. It was me working the gimmick, and then obviously, choke slams and doing all that. But when I finally got a taste, and I think it was, I want to say it was Bret Hart was one of the first guys that I got to work with. And Bret didn't really want to, he didn't really want to change his style too much to kind of cater to the Undertaker character. So it was my first chance really to actually work. And then I had to figure out, okay, now can you work the gimmick and then work a wrestling match? And I had some really, really good matches with Bret that I'm really proud of. Where that kind of started becoming, that was kind of where I started getting more better talent. And then obviously that went into the early Shawn Michaels stuff. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And so
did you ever have,
when I was young and really healthy, I wasn't taking a lot of bumps. And as I got older and more beat up, the more bumps I took, and I had the whole thing mixed up. I did it backwards.
Because when you're starting to do planches and stuff like that, you're like, now that I've gotten beat up a little bit, let me throw some lucha in here.
Yeah, right. What the heck am I thinking?
Did you have any hideous ideas, like before you actually found this character? Were there any hideous ideas that you're like, oh God, thank God that never took off?
Well, only the one that I created in my head. So I'm sure you probably have heard the story of Eggman by now. But no, so when Vince did he did the build up at the time that I debuted at Survivor Series in 90, they had the build up for the giant egg on set, and they were building up, and I had convinced myself without anybody saying a word to me that I was going to be coming out of that egg. And that I'd be Eggman. Like, I was at that point where I was trying to let my hair grow out, and I was working on my look and all that other stuff. And this is even before Undertaker was even ever had breath, breathed into it. So there's this egg on the set every week, right? And I'm at home, like watching. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna come out of that egg. I know it. It's gonna be me. I'm gonna come out of that egg. He's going to make me shave my head, and I'm going to have to shave my eyebrows, and I'm going to be Eggman. And I was honestly working myself up into a nervous panic. And finally one day the phone rang, and I got up because we didn't have cell phones. I got up, answered the phone, and it was like, I was like, hello. And he goes, is this the Undertaker? And I'm like, Undertaker. Undertaker's not Eggman. And it took me a second to realize it was Vince, right? And I was like, that's Vince. It ain't Eggman. Undertaker. Yes, sir. This is the Undertaker. Yeah. I just knew it wasn't. Honestly, I honestly about give myself an ulcer worrying about becoming Eggman. But fortunately, that wasn't the plan. That was the gobbledygooker. The gobbledygooker was in the egg.
And believe it or not, the Undertaker seemed to have more legs than the gobbledygooker character. I don't know who would have called it, but the Undertaker had legs.
Yeah, the gobbledygooker got served up later that night. I think he got carved up.
One of the, things that makes you is you're the one guy who stuck around. You're the guy who consistently was with WWE from 1990 until now. You're really the only person that can say that you were that person. Shawn never went to WCW, but he was gone for a period of time. The fact that you never went to WCW, though, is a pretty big deal because everybody went to WCW. Was there any point in your entire run, especially as hot as WCW was getting with the NWO, with Hulk Hogan, with all that stuff, was there ever even, did it cross your mind? Was there a moment where you were like, I'm closer now than I have been?
Yeah, there was a time, like, I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated with our creative direction. Like, we had a bunch of really goofy characters, and then they're down there doing some really, like, real angles, and and it was common knowledge that they basically opened up the checkbook, and and I'm having to hear guys talking about the money that they're making, and I'm like, my gosh, what you'd be able to write a pretty good check and stay at home most of the time. And so those thoughts were there, but when it really got down to it, I said, I can't. As and obviously I'm not the best businessman, but there's just something inside of me that said, you can't leave here. And then there's a couple of things. One, when I was there, and although the management had changed at this point, while I was there, I went in to renegotiate a contract. I'd been there for 8 or 9 months. My deal was coming up, and I was just going in, try to get a little bit of bump in the money, right? I was on the bare minimum deal. Wasn't looking to break the house, but I go in and meet with Jim Hurd, Ole Anderson, and Jim Barnett. Went there downtown in Atlanta. I go in, and they're thinking, well, we're gonna re-sign you to the same deal. And I was like, well, I've had a pretty good year here as far as where I was on the card and everything. And I was like, I was hoping to get a little bit of a bump in pay. And they looked at me straight in the eyes and said, son, they go, you're a great athlete, but no one will ever pay money to see you wrestle. Huh. So let that just sit in the room, right? I'm like,
right.
Wow. Okay. Now what do? Like, on the inside, like, I knew right then, like, my days here are numbered because I have a ceiling. They've already capped me out at what I can do and who I can be here. And then, fortunately, I got the meeting with Vince, and as soon as I got the meeting with Vince, I was like, okay, well, I got this meeting with Vince. They'll hire me straight away. So I give my notice just on the meeting. I go have the meeting with Vince. At the end of the meeting, he goes, well, and it was at the house. It was at his house too, right? So I go have this meeting, and at the end of the meeting, he goes, well, we don't really have anything for you right now. I was like, okay, didn't plan on that one either.
It's like you broke up with a girl before you had a new girlfriend.
So yeah, I just like, wow, this is not going real well at the time. But obviously Vince eventually calls me, and he's like, look, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do something. And that by him giving me the opportunity, and after what the other guys had said to me, I was just like, this is, obviously. And then, Undertaker happened, and we're off and running. I was just like, I can't leave. I just, my loyalty to him for giving me that opportunity was more than, the short-term cash in that I could have done by going back down to WCW. So
was that motivating or crushing when they started? Was that motivating or crushing when they said, no one will pay to see you wrestle? Is there a party that goes like, God, they're right? Or is there a party that goes, screw these guys, I'll show them?
No, I mean, it was a definite hit to my pride for sure. But at that point, I was locked in. I knew that this was what I was going to do. And like, I had that passion bug, and it just like, okay, I just knew my days there were numbered.
Right.
I had I didn't ever second guess myself as like, I need to get a new job or go back to school. It was like, okay, I got to make some moves. And then, but it was always fuel. it really was always fuel. I've never forgot it. Obviously, I'm bringing it up
Yeah.
30 plus years later,
Yeah.
but I've always, I've always had that in my back of my mind, like no one will ever pay to see you wrestle. Like, well, guess
And
you
I love that
missed
you'll
that
go
one.
from, yeah, exactly, because 7 years later, they're literally putting an inflatable version of you outside of arenas so they can tell the world, hey, guess who's in here? I thought it was interesting. We were talking about like people that were brought in to be your opponent, right? To be the next monster that the Undertaker has to conquer. And you were also talking about that kind of goofy era and how it got to the point where you're like, what are we doing here creatively? And I actually think that for you, what brought your character kind of out of that goofy territory and let's do Undertaker versus Undertaker. Let's do Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. Let's do Undertaker. I think it was Mick Foley being brought in. And I think the Undertaker Mankind feud, which, if Mick Foley wasn't Mick Foley, could have just been another somebody being brought in for the Undertaker to compete with, changed, I feel like, both of you guys forever. Do you think I'm right about that? And do you have a favorite Mick Foley match?
Man, you're dead on with that. And so I knew we had worked a little bit together in WCW. He was Cactus Jack. So, I knew what Mick was about, and I knew him as a little bit as a person. And then, just kind of like I always had confidence that was going to work. And, but you're right. It had the potential to be a stinker, because his character, if he hadn't have done his character so well,
right.
That was the thing. You had a bunch of guys doing silly characters that they didn't have a clue how to work. They didn't want to be working these characters, but he embraced Mankind and made it his own. And it allowed us to do things, as far as violence and physicality that people hadn't really ever seen. So it was a breath of fresh air to me. And I think that was a very pivotal part in the Undertaker lore, was the whole Mankind angle. And man, I there's so much stuff that we did, the Boiler Room Brawl and Hell in a Cell. And
yeah, when you think about it, it's like the Boiler Room Brawl is what made it so that you and Paul Bearer weren't connected anymore. And then when you come back at Survivor Series, that's when you've shed kind of the purple and black cartoon Undertaker that we know, and that's when the all black and the leather and the teardrop and all that stuff. And I feel like that's really the evolution of the character. But like, speaking of Hell in a Cell, right? You've got this guy. You're wrestling. The Hell in a Cell is probably, it's, to me, I believe it's the most famous wrestling match for non-wrestling fans. Everybody knows, about that match. There's a folklore behind it.
Right.
You're wrestling that match with a broken foot. You've already thrown Mick Foley off the thing. He's crashed through the table. We knew this was going to happen. When there's that moment when he goes through the cell, which was not supposed to happen, he hits that ring, and really at that point, only you and him know how badly that's going to hurt. Most of the fans at home are still like, oh, it's like a trampoline, that wrestling ring. They don't know that it's like hitting concrete. And the chair hits him on the way down and everything. And you at that point realize that the crowd doesn't know that something's gone horribly wrong and your friend is hurt for sure.
Right.
And you're sitting now on top of this structure and you don't know what to do. What's going through your head?
I was trying to focus and hope that he could move, because I honestly that was really close to being catastrophic. It really was. And he'd already, like I said, he'd already taken the bump off the top, and although that was planned, that was no easy. That's just not easy to do, and it ain't easy on the body. And then this happens, and he landed in such a funky way. I didn't know that he was going to get up. And so, I'm having to think like, okay, I need to get down there for one, and check on him. But, man, I was legit scared for what the results were going to be. And he's just a tough son of a gun, man. I don't, most people don't get up from that like he did. I mean, get up and finish the match. And I'm trying to talk to him, and I'm like, Mick, let's go home. All he wanted to do, he said, we got to get to the tax. We got to get to the tax. I'm like, are you shitting me? Really? I mean, I'm looking at his, I had no idea what it was at the time, but his tooth went through his lip, and ended up lodged in his nostril, right? And you could look in his eyes and tell you there was nobody home, but he knew that he had to get to the thumbtacks, and that was the finish. And I was pleading with him, just like, man, Mick, can we go home? Because you could just tell that he was not there. And tough dude, man. Real. Honestly, I don't know if there's anybody any tougher, or anybody else that would have the sense of responsibility to even try and finish that match.
Well, we got to wrap you. This has been awesome. I mean, this is, as Jim knows, I've interviewed just about every professional wrestler on the planet, and you are every time anybody's ever asked, who's the one guy that you haven't interviewed? Who's the one guy you'd like to interview? Undertaker is always the name, and now you've crossed that name off the list. So we really both appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate The Last Ride. The docuseries is incredible. Episode 4 premieres on the WWE Network on Sunday. And real quick, I'm watching episode 3. I think it was episode 3, and you're talking about the relationship with Shawn and Triple H, and you're talking about the moment that you guys had at WrestleMania after the second match with Triple H, and the moment that the three of you have on that stage. And this docuseries is kind of about you chasing what is the moment that is going to cap off your career. Is there any part of you that is worried, wait a minute, maybe that was the moment?
Yeah, obviously, because that moment was organic. It wasn't planned. It really was just something that happened. After that, like I said, that angle was 4 years in the bill. 2 with Shawn, 2 with him, and it ends up with all three of us up there at the top of the stage. And you can kind of look in my eyes, and I'm looking around even while we're up there, and I'm enjoying the moment that I had with these two guys, which I hold the utmost respect for. But I'm also looking around like, does it get any better than this? Right? Does it get any better?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we know I kept going, but it was definitely one of those moments. And then I had the moment with the second match with Shawn. Like, because you have to, I'm looking down the road like, okay, who else is left that I can have this kind of match with anyway? There's not a lot of Shawn Michaels. I mean, there's some really good talent, but there's not a lot of Shawn Michaels and Triple H's out there left. And, but just, for whatever reason, I kept rolling and here we are. So, but that's one of the most special moments of my career, is being on stage with those three guys at the end of, of an all out in our profession, a war.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, one question. Would you be open to the idea of you and I hanging out just to upset Sam?
I got no problem with that.
Okay, great.
It would upset me greatly.
Yeah, it would really hurt him.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate the time.
Guys, thanks, and I apologize again for being a little late, man.
No, it's fine. It was great talking to you.
No worries. Yeah, awesome.
All right, man. It's nice talking to you guys. Y'all have a good day.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.